Grayson Shaw was not the kind of man who stayed up past midnight without a reason, but that night sleep evaded him like a ghost slipping through the cracks of his enormous penthouse high above the Los Angeles skyline. He sat in the leather chair of his study, nursing a glass of scotch that had long since lost its ice. The silence in his home was oppressive, almost cruel. He reached for the remote and flicked on the security monitor out of habit more than interest. What he saw made him freeze. The pool bathed in the faint glow of the underwater lights rippled softly. And in the center of it was a figure. At first, he thought it was a trick of the camera, but as the image focused, he recognized her. Sophia, his live-in maid. But she was not cleaning, she was not working. She was curled up in the water, completely naked. Her back to the camera, her shoulders trembling with sobs. Grayson stared. She did not know anyone was watching. She did not think anyone ever would. Her arms were wrapped around her chest, her long dark hair plastered to her skin, her body almost motionless, except for the shivers that occasionally rocked her frame. She looked small, vulnerable, lost. He should have looked away. It would have been the right thing to do. But something about that moment held him captive. Not because of her nakedness. It was not about that. It was the pain, the raw, unfiltered grief that clung to her like the water around her. He had seen that kind of pain before, in the hospital room, in his wife's eyes, in the mirror for years after. Grayson turned off the monitor abruptly. His hand shook as he set down the remote. He leaned back and closed his eyes, trying to erase the image from his mind, but it was impossible. The loneliness, the desperation on her face, etched itself into his thoughts like a scar being carved in slow motion. He didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her again, floating in that pool like a ghost. Sophia had been working in his home for nearly a year. She never spoke unless spoken to. Always polite, always quiet. She did her job with precision and left no trace behind. Grayson had barely noticed her presence until now. She had become part of the background in his carefully controlled life. Until that moment on the screen, now she was all he could think about. The next morning, he stood in the kitchen longer than usual, watching the entrance like a man, waiting for something he did not understand. When she finally walked in, fully dressed in her usual gray uniform hair, tied up her eyes downcast, he felt a strange tightness in his chest. She said good morning softly, then moved toward the sink. He didn't say anything. He couldn't. Not yet. But he knew one thing. Something had broken inside that girl. And maybe, just maybe, he was not as hollow as he thought. Because for the first time in years, he wanted to do something for someone else. Not for business, not for profit. He wanted to help her. Even if she never found out. Even if he never understood why. Because sometimes a man who's lost everything can still recognize what it looks like when someone else is about to disappear. Grayson Shaw built his fortune on algorithms and precision, not emotions. At 38, he was already one of the wealthiest men on the West Coast, a name whispered in investor meetings and shouted in headlines. His company revolutionized artificial intelligence in financial prediction, and with each quarterly profit, his distance from the rest of the world seemed to grow. Since his wife Amelia passed away 3 years earlier, the mansion overlooking Mulholland Drive had become a sterile fortress. No children's laughter, no warmth in the hallways, no personal photos on the shelves. Just silence, high ceilings, and curated art that meant nothing to him. He kept the house spotless, not for himself, but because it was easier to live in a world with no reminders of the mess inside. That was why he hired live-in staff cleaners, a chef, a rotating team of assistants, all invisible people who made sure the illusion of control was never disturbed. Sofia Ramirez was one of them. She came recommended by an agency that specialized in legal immigrants with discreet backgrounds and a willingness to work long hours for generous pay. She had been working for him for 11 months, and in that time Grayson could count the number of full sentences she had spoken to him. She moved like smoke, efficient, wordless, with the softness of someone who had spent her whole life avoiding attention. She cleaned in the early mornings, restocked the cabinets, folded the laundry into perfect squares, and never lingered. She had her own small room above the garage, rarely left the property, and requested no days off. He had never questioned it. Not until now. Now, after seeing her in the pool, he couldn't stop questioning everything. Who was this girl who cried in the dark and thought no one saw her? Why was she still working here, hiding in plain sight? And why did her sadness bother him more than his own? Grayson started noticing things he had ignored before. The way her eyes were always red in the morning, the way she flinched slightly if he walked into a room too quietly, the soft Spanish lullabies she hummed while wiping the counters when she thought no one could hear. He had known grief, but hers was different. She wasn't just mourning, she was surviving, barely. That week something shifted in him. He began staying home more often, skipping meetings, canceling dinners. Not because he wanted to be near her, at least not at first. It was more like an itch he couldn't scratch. He found excuses to pass through the kitchen when she was there. He asked questions he normally wouldn't like, whether she liked the food the chef prepared, or if the room she slept in was warm enough. She always answered politely, eyes lowered, then returned to her work, as if nothing had changed. But something had. One morning, while watering the plants on the balcony, he noticed her standing alone in the backyard. No cleaning supplies, no task in hand, just standing still, looking at the pool. He watched her from a distance, waiting for her to move. She didn't. She just stood there, eyes distant, like she was remembering something no one else could see. It was the first time he realized that maybe she wasn't just working to survive. Maybe she was trying not to vanish. Grayson had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, money, power, access. Sofia didn't want anything, not even to be seen. And yet now that he had seen her, really seen her, he couldn't pretend he hadn't. The pool had become a place of questions for him, not because of what she had done in it, but because of what it revealed. Vulnerability, fragility, a story he didn't yet know. He was a man used to solving puzzles, decoding patterns, finding logic in chaos. But this was different. This was personal. He didn't know why he cared, only that he did. And that realization for a man like Grayson Shaw was the beginning of something he could not control. Grayson never considered himself an emotional man. He calculated, evaluated, and executed. In business, everything had a reason, a number, a pattern. But the feelings that began to stir inside him whenever Sofia entered a room defied all of that. He watched her more now, not like an employer watching an employee, but like a man trying to decipher a language he had forgotten how to speak. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear while cleaning the windows. The way her lips tightened slightly, when she passed the family photos still hanging untouched in the hallway. He noticed every small detail. He started adjusting his own schedule to align with hers. If she cleaned the study at 10, he made sure to be working there at the same time. If she did the laundry in the evening, he passed by the laundry room under the pretense of checking on something meaningless. It wasn't manipulation. He didn't even know what he wanted. He only knew he needed to be near her. One afternoon, he returned from a meeting earlier than expected and found her in the kitchen, struggling to open a jar. She didn't see him enter. Her hands were shaking, her knuckles white around the glass lid. He stepped forward and gently took the jar from her hands without a word. It popped open effortlessly in his grip. She startled when their eyes met. "Thank you," she murmured, eyes dropping instantly. He wanted to say something, to ask if she was okay, if she had eaten, if she ever slept. But all that came out was a simple question. "Do you like working here?" She hesitated. "Yes," she said quietly. "It's peaceful." He didn't know why that answer disturbed him. Peaceful. As if this sterile mansion could offer anyone comfort. As if loneliness had become her definition of peace. The days continued, each one filled with small encounters that meant nothing to the world and everything to him. One night he passed by the living room and found her standing in front of the piano. Her fingers hovered just above the keys. He didn't know she played. She never touched it when anyone was around. He stood in the shadow of the hallway and listened as her fingers pressed gently against the ivory. It was a slow melody, melancholy, haunting, beautiful. The kind of music that carried pain inside each note. When she finished, she sat still for a long moment. Then she looked up and whispered something under her breath. He couldn't hear what she said. He stepped forward. "That was beautiful." She jumped, startled. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "No," I said quickly. "Don't stop." Her cheeks flushed. "I haven't played in a long time. It didn't sound like that. It sounded like someone remembering who they used to be." He asked her about the song, and she told him it was a lullaby her mother used to sing. A Spanish tune with no official name, just something passed down. That night, for the first time, they talked, not as boss and maid, but as people. She told him she was from a small village near the border, that she had come to the States 5 years ago, that she had once dreamed of becoming a music teacher. He listened, truly listened, and when she spoke of her past, her voice cracked. He wanted to reach out to hold her, to tell her she didn't have to carry it alone. But he didn't. Not yet. The next day, he left a small package outside her door. Inside was a new set of piano sheet music and a handwritten note. "Play more. The house needs it." He signed only with an initial. She never mentioned it. But that evening, the piano sang again, slowly, carefully, like her heart was testing the air. It became a quiet routine. She played, he listened, sometimes from the hallway, sometimes seated nearby. Words passed between them in stolen moments. Their silences spoke more than any conversation. Then came the night that changed everything. Grayson had returned late from a rare dinner event. The house was dark, except for the soft glow from the pool outside. He walked toward the backyard, needing air, needing space from the pretense of his public life. As he stepped onto the patio, he stopped. Sophia stood at the edge of the pool, fully dressed this time, staring at the water like it held answers. She didn't hear him approach. She whispered something in Spanish too soft to catch. Then she kicked off her shoes and sat at the edge, dipping her feet in. Grayson cleared his throat gently. She turned, startled, but didn't move away. "You come here often at night," he said softly. She nodded. "It helps me breathe." He sat beside her without asking. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was familiar, safe. After a moment, she spoke. "Do you ever feel like you're just surviving? Like the days pass, but you're not really in them?" He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "Every day since I lost my wife." She looked at him, then really looked. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded. "Me too." They sat there for what felt like hours, the cool night air wrapped around them like a secret. When she finally stood, she hesitated. Then she reached out and placed a hand gently on his. "Thank you for not pretending I'm invisible." And then she walked away. That single touch stayed with him longer than he expected. It haunted him. It comforted him. It opened something inside him he had kept locked away for years. The next morning he woke early. He canceled all his meetings. And for the first time in years, he cooked breakfast. It wasn't perfect. The eggs were overdone, and the toast was too dry. But he set 2 plates on the kitchen island and waited. When Sophia walked in, her eyes widened in surprise. "I thought maybe he said carefully you'd join me, just for breakfast." She looked at the plate, then at him. Slowly she nodded. "Okay." And just like that, a door opened, not wide, but enough for light to slip through. The following weeks unfolded with a quiet rhythm neither of them dared to disrupt. Breakfasts became routine, though no words were spoken about them. Grayson would be in the kitchen first, always a bit awkward with the skillet, but he improved. Sophia would enter, still shy, still hesitant, but the distance between them shortened with each shared morning. They spoke more now, not about deep things at first, weather, music, her favorite type of tea, his strange dislike for oranges. It was mundane, ordinary. But in a house that had forgotten how to breathe, their conversations felt like sunlight sneaking through a window that had been shut for too long. One evening, Grayson returned from the city earlier than expected. He had left a board meeting mid-discussion, distracted by thoughts he couldn't ignore. He found Sophia in the music room, fingers gently brushing the keys of the piano without pressing down. He stepped in quietly. She didn't look up. "Do you want to play?" he asked softly. Her hands dropped. "I was thinking about—" She turned to face him. "Something I haven't told you." Her voice trembled. "You don't have to," he said, but she shook her head. "I do. Because you've been kind, and I can't accept that kindness without telling you who I really am." Grayson sat down across from her, his attention fixed. She inhaled deeply, eyes flickering with something more than pain. Fear. "I had a daughter. Her name was Lucia. She was 3. Grayson felt something tighten in his chest. She was my everything, my joy, my light. When I came to America, I brought her with me. It wasn't legal, I know that, but I had no choice. Her father, he wasn't safe. I had to leave. We crossed the border together. It was dangerous, but I kept her alive. I did everything to give her a life better than mine." She looked away. Her voice dropped. "Last year she got sick, fever. At first I thought it was nothing, just a cold. But it got worse. I didn't have insurance. I was afraid to take her to a hospital. I was afraid they'd find out I didn't have papers, that they'd take her away. So I waited. Too long. By the time I rushed her to the ER, it was too late." Grayson stared at her, unmoving the weight of her words, anchoring him to the chair. "She died that night. In my arms. She was so small, so warm. And then she wasn't." Sophia's voice broke. "I stopped being a mother. I stopped being anything. I came here because I needed somewhere to disappear. I needed a job where no one would ask questions. I needed silence. She looked up at him, then eyes brimming. And then you saw me. I didn't mean for that night at the pool to happen. I wasn't trying to do anything. I wanted to feel the water, to float, to be close to something that didn't hurt. I didn't know the cameras were still on. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry, not for not seeing sooner." She nodded once, swallowing hard. "Thank you for not looking at me like I'm broken." He leaned forward. "You're not. You've survived what most people couldn't." She stood suddenly. "I should go back to work." He stood too. "Sophia." She turned. "I meant what I said. You're not invisible here. Not anymore." She left the room, but her scent lingered, and so did the ache she left behind. That night, Grayson lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts weren't numbers. They weren't projections or algorithms. They were of her story, of Lucia, of the weight she carried every day beneath that quiet demeanor. He thought of Amelia, of how he had once feared losing her, and how that fear had come true. He had lived in silence ever since. Now he recognized that silence in Sophia. The next day he made a decision. He called his lawyer and asked him to look into ways to assist Sophia. Not just legally, but financially. The man on the other line reminded him of the complications. "She's undocumented, sir. There could be risk." "Then we take the risk," Grayson said, quietly but firmly. He began taking steps, small at first. A doctor's appointment scheduled in her name, paid anonymously. A new mattress delivered to her quarters. Fresh clothes left folded on her bed. Sophia noticed everything, but she said nothing. Until one night she knocked on his study door. He looked up surprised. She had never come to him before. She stepped in and closed the door behind her. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. He paused. "Because you need help. Because I can. Because I want to." Her eyes studied his face like she was searching for a lie. And when she found none, she exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to let people care about me anymore." "That's okay," he said. "We can take it slow." She stepped closer. The lights from the hallway cast a soft glow behind her, outlining her in warmth. She looked more alive than he had ever seen her. "If I let you care, will you promise not to walk away?" Grayson stood, closing the space between them. "I don't run from things worth staying for." Her lips parted, but no words came. Only tears. Silent, real, and sacred. He reached for her hand and held it without expectation. Just presence. Just being. That night they did not kiss. They did not cross any lines. They simply sat together in the quiet of a study where so many decisions had been made. And for once, Grayson knew this wasn't just another decision. This was the start of something he hadn't dared to want in years. Something terrifying, something human, something true. It began with laughter, the kind that slipped out unexpectedly during breakfast when Grayson made a sarcastic comment about the toast being more stone than bread. Sophia laughed a real sound, not polite or forced, and he looked at her like he had never seen her before. The tension that had once filled the space between them had softened into something unspoken but shared. Their routines continued, but now they carried weight. Their walks in the garden were longer, their conversations deeper. Grayson started reading again, not business articles, but novels Sophia left behind in the library. She recommended one, and he read it in 2 nights. Then they spent hours discussing it, sitting under the tree in the backyard, like two students discovering the world through each other's eyes. One evening, Grayson found her in the greenhouse, humming that same lullaby. He listened quietly. When she noticed him, she didn't flinch. She just smiled. The kind of smile that said, "I'm not afraid anymore." That night, she stayed longer in the music room. He asked her to teach him how to play a few simple notes. She placed her fingers over his and guided them gently. Her touch was light, but it lingered. He looked at her, and for the first time, their eyes didn't look away. Their closeness grew with every shared hour. One night, as the rain tapped softly against the windows, they found themselves seated together on the floor of the music room, surrounded by books and unfinished songs. Grayson looked at her, really looked, and whispered, "You make this house feel like a home again." Sophia looked at him with something between fear and longing. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. Slowly, he leaned in. Their lips met not with urgency, but with a question, and the answer was yes. When they pulled apart, Sophia whispered, "I didn't think I could feel this again." Grayson rested his forehead against hers. "Neither did I." In the days that followed, the air between them changed. Not heavy, not awkward, but fragile. They tiptoed around the moment, unsure of how to name it. But then it shattered. It happened on a Thursday. Grayson had stepped out for a meeting, promising to return early. Sophia stayed behind practicing a new piece of music she had found in the attic. While cleaning the upstairs hall, she found the door to Amelia's old studio slightly ajar. She had never gone in before. Something always held her back. But today something drew her in. The room was untouched. Canvases leaned against the walls. Paints dried up in glass jars. Sketches half finished on the easel. There were photos, too, of Amelia, of Grayson, of the life that had existed here before her. Sophia stepped deeper inside, touching nothing, only observing. A canvas caught her attention. A portrait unfinished, but clearly a woman with dark hair and sad eyes. Her eyes. Sophia froze. It was her. The lines weren't exact, but the shape, the expression, it was her face. A chill swept through her. She backed out of the room and closed the door behind her. When Grayson returned that evening, he found her distant, reserved. She didn't eat much at dinner, didn't play the piano, didn't smile. He noticed. "Something wrong?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Just tired," but he knew it was more. The next morning she was gone. No note, no message. Her room was clean, her things packed. Panic hit him like a wave. He called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. He searched every camera feed. She had left through the front gate before sunrise. The weight of her absence crushed him. Days passed, then a week. Grayson functioned mechanically. He worked, he ate. But the house was hollow again. His staff noticed but said nothing. He spent nights in the music room, staring at the piano, waiting for sounds that never came. He thought of her laughter, her voice, her pain. He realized something he had never admitted, not even to himself. He loved her, not with the naive hope of a man looking to fill a void, but with the raw, terrifying certainty of someone who had lost and still chose to love again. He needed to find her, not to beg, not to demand, but to tell her what she had become to him, everything. He called in favors, hired investigators. Eventually, someone found her, a small town near the border, working at a shelter for mothers and children. Grayson didn't tell anyone where he was going. He got in his car and drove. When he arrived, the shelter was humble. A white building with chipped paint and children playing in the dirt yard. Inside it smelled of soup and soap. He asked for Sophia. A woman pointed toward the back. He walked through the hallway and found her in a room, reading to a small group of children. She looked different, softer, still sad, still strong. When she saw him, her mouth opened, but no words came. He stepped forward. "You left," he said. I was afraid she replied. Of what he asked? That I was just a replacement. That I was filling a space in your heart that never really belonged to me. He shook his head. "You are not a shadow. You are not second. You are you, and I love you." She closed her eyes. "I wasn't ready. I know," he said, "but I am here. I'm not going anywhere." She stepped toward him, tears forming again. Grayson took her hand and held it tightly. "I don't want a home without you in it." For a long time, neither spoke. And then she whispered, "I want to believe you." He kissed her hand. "Then let me prove it." Sophia returned with him a week later. There were no grand announcements, no declarations to the staff, just quiet presence. She unpacked her things slowly, taking her time arranging them in the same room she had once tried to disappear into. But this time it felt different. She wasn't hiding. She was choosing. Grayson gave her space. He didn't push. He didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. He simply existed beside her, showing up every morning with coffee and waiting every evening for the music to return to the piano room. It did eventually. Not all at once, but in soft melodies that drifted down the halls like hope. They began rebuilding not just their connection, but themselves. Grayson found himself laughing more. Not the polite, empty chuckles he had used to fill business dinners, but real laughter full and unguarded. He learned to cook more than toast. He started asking about her childhood, about her dreams. Sophia began leaving her bedroom door open. She started reading again, sketching in the garden, humming softly while folding towels. The house came alive with her in it. The silence that had once haunted its walls was now filled with breath and light. But healing isn't always linear. Some days were still hard. There were nights Sophia would wake up from dreams she never spoke of. Grayson would find her sitting on the floor beside the bed arms, wrapped around her knees, eyes lost. He never asked. He just sat beside her sometimes, holding her hand, sometimes just being near. One night during one of those silences, she whispered, "I still hear her. Lucia." Sometimes I swear I can feel her little hand in mine. Grayson didn't reply with comfort. He didn't try to fix it. He simply said, "Maybe that's her way of staying with you." Sophia leaned into him, and for the first time she let herself cry fully without shame. The emotional shift between them became deeper. It wasn't just love blooming, it was trust being rebuilt. They began doing more together: grocery shopping, volunteering weekends at a local community kitchen. Grayson started attending events not for networking, but to support causes Sophia believed in. Their bond wasn't built on luxury or convenience. It was built on shared vulnerability. Then came the twist neither of them expected. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Sophia had gone out to the city to run errands. Grayson, reviewing paperwork in his office, received a call from his lawyer. "There's something you should see," his attorney said. An envelope arrived this morning. It was a letter from Sophia's late daughter's biological father, the man she had fled from. Grayson's stomach tightened. The letter was brief, but laced with poison. The man claimed he knew where Sophia was. He demanded money to stay silent. A veiled threat, nothing overt but enough to ignite every protective instinct Grayson had. He didn't tell Sophia immediately. That night she returned smiling, holding fresh flowers she wanted to place in the entryway. Grayson pretended nothing was wrong, but the weight of the secret grew heavier each day. He met with security. He called in favors. He hired someone to track the man's movements. And still he said nothing to Sophia until she found the letter. She wasn't looking for it. It had been left on his desk under a stack of documents. She didn't read it all, just enough to know. When Grayson walked into the study, her face was pale. Her hands trembled. "You didn't tell me." He reached for her. "I was going to. I was just trying to handle it. You lied. I protected you." She stepped back. "You don't get to decide how I face my past. That's not love, that's control." He was silent. She shook her head. "I thought we were building something real, but maybe we're just pretending, like before." Her words hit harder than he expected. She left the room. This time she didn't pack. She didn't slam doors. She just disappeared into her silence again. Grayson waited. He didn't chase her this time. He let her process. He knew he had failed her trust. Days passed. The house dimmed again. But Sophia didn't leave. She stayed, quiet, cold, distant. Until one morning something changed. Grayson woke to the smell of food. Not from the chef, from the kitchen. He walked down and found Sophia cooking breakfast. She looked at him, her eyes clear but unreadable. "I was wrong too," she said softly. "I ran from the truth as much as you tried to shield me from it." He moved closer, careful. "I thought if I controlled it, I could protect you. But that wasn't my decision." "I know why you did it," she said. "But we promised no more hiding, not from each other." They stood in silence for a moment. Then she stepped forward and handed him a plate. "Let's start over." Again. That evening they sat by the pool, the same place she once cried alone, the same water that had once held her brokenness. Now it reflected the golden light of sunset, soft and full of warmth. Sophia reached for his hand. "There's something else," she whispered. "Something I haven't told you." Grayson turned to her. "I'm listening. I went to see a counselor, a grief specialist. I've been going once a week." He didn't respond immediately. Then he smiled. "I'm proud of you." She nodded. "I want to be whole again. Not for you, for me." "You already are," he whispered. She leaned into his shoulder, and for the first time she believed it. That night she asked him to sleep beside her, not out of need, out of choice. And he did. No questions, no promises. Just two people choosing each other in the quiet aftermath of pain. The wedding was small, no headlines, no cameras. Just a handful of people who mattered. Sophia wore a simple ivory dress. Her hair loose around her shoulders, a single flower tucked behind her ear. Grayson stood beneath the blooming magnolia tree in their garden, waiting, his heart beating not with nerves, but with something steadier, deeper. Peace. When she walked toward him, barefoot in the grass, her eyes never left his. She had never looked more radiant, not because of the dress or the setting, but because she had returned to herself, whole, present, alive. They exchanged vows in soft voices. No audience, only the sky above and the earth below. "I loved you before I knew your story," Grayson said, "and now I love you even more because of it." Sophia smiled through tears. "You saw me when I had nothing left. You gave me the space to remember who I was." After the ceremony, they sat by the pool where it had all begun. The water was still, reflective. no longer a place of sorrow, but of memory and transformation. Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think Lucia would be proud of me?" she whispered. Grayson took her hand. "I know she would. You didn't just survive. You became someone she would want to grow into." Months passed. The house remained the same in structure, but everything else changed. Laughter returned. Music echoed through the halls. Meals were shared, not in silence, but with stories and soft glances. Sophia began teaching piano to children from the shelter. Grayson opened a foundation in Lucia's name, helping immigrant families access health care without fear. The man who once lived in spreadsheets now sat in circles of children, reading stories aloud. One day, Sophia walked out into the backyard to find Grayson building a swing beneath the magnolia tree. "For who?" she asked, amused. "For us," he said. "For now. For whatever comes next." She kissed him there in the sunlight, with the wind in their hair and the scent of summer all around. Because it wasn't about filling a void anymore. It wasn't about saving each other. It was about choosing to stay again and again, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Love didn't erase the past, it honored it. And in doing so, it gave them something stronger than beginnings. It gave them a future. Sometimes the person who saves you doesn't arrive with answers. They arrive with presence, with patience, with the willingness to sit beside your pain until you're ready to stand. Grayson had lost everything once. Sophia had nearly disappeared beneath her grief, but they had found each other. Not perfectly, not quickly, but fully. And in that imperfect journey, they built a life worth returning to every day. Because real love isn't loud, it's steady. It's the quiet voice that whispers, "I'm here and I'm not leaving, not this time."